Napoleon Bonaparte. Wow, that name, it just echoes through history, doesn't it? Ambition, military genius, a legacy that still has people talking. You've given us some really intriguing stuff on him, so let's dig in. We've got, it looks like scenes from a play almost about Napoleon, definitely more dramatic than your typical textbook, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. It's those little details, the ones you don't always get that really bring him and the whole era to life.
And of course, I've got our history guru here with us, ready to sort through it all, separate the fact from the historical embellishments.
Always happy to be here and a good Napoleon deep dive. I'm there.
All right, so beginnings. Napoleon, born in Corsica, same year France, decides Corsica, you're ours now. 1769, you've even got it circled in your notes here. Talk about a complicated start, huh?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, to go from basically, a conquered citizen to Emperor of France, that's some serious ambition, something that had to be shaped early on, don't you think?
You mentioned how, even in Corsica, Napoleon felt like an outsider. And this quote from the script is wild. He says, I was Corsican by birth and sentiments, but French by choice and by the decrees of destiny. It's like right there you see that need for validation, starting in those military academies, but playing out on a huge scale later on.
Classic outsider story, when you think about it. Prove yourself. Overcome the doubters. That kind of energy, it pushed him forward up through the ranks of the French military.
And talk about a rapid rise. The script really focuses on those early wins in Italy. This wasn't just luck. The guy was a military prodigy, plain and simple.
Oh, for sure. You see Napoleon's strategic mind at work right from the get-go. Like the Battle of Lodi in 96, he marches his men across a bridge, heavily defended, mind you. It was a huge gamble that caught the Austrians completely off guard. Total victory for Napoleon. This wasn't just about winning battles. He was changing how wars were fought, the kind of tactical genius. Military minds still study it today.
Okay, so we've got this ambitious young officer from Corsica making a name for himself, racking up these impressive victories, and then boom, the French Revolution explodes onto the scene in 1789. So what's Napoleon's take on all of this? How does he react?
This is where it gets really interesting. Napoleon's a man of contradictions, you see, shaped by Enlightenment ideals, but also driven by this incredible ambition. The French Revolution, with all its talk of liberty, equality, fraternity, he sees it as both an opportunity and a platform.
So almost opportunistic. Like he's on board with the revolution, but not with his whole heart.
Exactly. He liked what the revolution could do, but he was also completely willing to, let's say, adjust its principles to fit his own goals. He was famous for saying, I am the revolution, but he wasn't afraid to grab power, centralize control, even as the revolution itself was becoming more and more chaotic.
So he's riding this wave of revolution straight to the top. War hero to consul, basically the ruler of France. And then, in 1804, what does he do? Crowns himself emperor. I mean, that's a bold move, even for someone as ambitious as Napoleon.
Napoleon was a master at seizing the moment. He understood that power, well, it doesn't wait for an invitation. France, after the revolution, it was messy, and he stepped in, offered stability, a vision for a strong, unified country. Crowning himself emperor, in his mind, he was just, making it official.
And it's not just about armies and politics with him, is it? He's got this whole other side reshaping France from the inside out. This Napoleonic code, you highlighted it. This is a big deal, right? Not just some minor legal tweaks.
Oh, absolutely not. The Napoleonic Code, think 1804, it was revolutionary, honestly. You've got to imagine for the first time, one set of laws for all of France. Before that, it was like a patchwork quilt. Every region with its own rules, its own traditions.
So way more than just simplifying things then, right? He's putting some pretty radical ideas into actual law.
Exactly. Equality under the law, boom. No more feudal privileges, gone. Freedom of religion, you got it. It was a total break from the old ways of doing things, and its impact, it wasn't just contained to France, it spread throughout Europe.
It's amazing, isn't it? You've got Napoleon, this military genius, conquering half the continent, but he's also taking the time to create a whole new legal system. Makes you wonder, did he see this code as his legacy? Like something that would outlast his victories on the battlefield?
Now that's a question, isn't it? But you're right, Napoleon, he knew his history. He understood the power of image, of how he'd be remembered. And this code, with its emphasis on reason, on order, it's like he's trying to impose his vision of a modern, rational society, not just on France, but on all of Europe.
It's that duality again, isn't it? The reformer and the conqueror all rolled into one Napoleon.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A walking contradiction, a true man of the Enlightenment, but, not afraid to rule with an iron fist if he had to.
Which brings us to those military campaigns, right? You marked the Battle of Austerlitz, 1805, as a major turning point.
Austerlitz, some would say Napoleon's greatest victory. It cemented his reputation as, well, a military genius. Outmaneuvered the combined forces of Austria and Russia, a decisive victory that echoed across Europe.
The script describes it as this perfectly executed strategy. Like he could see into the minds of his enemies, knew exactly where they were weak, and then struck, bam, just like that.
You got it. Napoleon, he had this uncanny ability to read the battlefield, size up his opponents in an instant, and then boom, he'd attack with this incredible speed and precision. It was remarkable.
But as amazing as Austerlitz was, it sort of kicks off this period of escalating conflict. He just keeps pushing further and further across Europe. Didn't he famously say, and I'm paraphrasing here, that impossible is just a word you find in the dictionary of fools?
He did say that. And, while it's often seen as this inspirational quote, a testament to his self-belief, it also hints at something else, doesn't it? A certain, shall we say, hubris, a belief that he was untouchable, which ultimately might have contributed to his downfall.
And that downfall, it really starts with Spain and, of course, Russia.
Yep.
Two very different fronts, two very different enemies, but both equally devastating for Napoleon.
Exactly. Spain, now that was a quagmire if there ever was one.
Oh,
A war of attrition that just drained the French, their resources, their morale, everything. Napoleon, he was used to quick victories, decisive action, but he underestimated the Spanish people, their sheer will to resist. They didn't want his brother on their throne no matter what.
The script mentions guerrilla warfare here, and it seems like this is the first time it really comes into play in this way. This wasn't your typical, two armies lined up on a big open field kind of fight anymore.
Not at all. The Spanish resistance, it was fueled by this intense nationalism, and they took to these guerrilla tactics ambushes, disrupting supply lines, making the entire country a nightmare for the French. Brutal, unforgiving, and it really showed that even Napoleon's army had its limits.
And then, of course, there's Russia. The 1812 campaign, a frozen wasteland that swallowed his Grande Armée whole.
Oh, Russia. A disaster of epic, epic proportions. Napoleon, blinded by ambition, by this belief in his own invincibility, he marches into Russia with an army, over 600,000 men? But Russia is vast, the Russians were ruthless, and then there's the winter.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? Even the most brilliant military mind, sometimes nature has other plans.
It really is. The Russian campaign, it shattered the illusion of Napoleon's invincibility. It showed the cracks in his empire, and more importantly, it emboldened his enemies.
And this is where things really start to unravel for Napoleon, right? The tide turns, the victories dry up, and the empire he built, the image he so carefully crafted, it all starts to crumble. And from Russia, it's like watching like a landslide. One defeat leads to another, and Napoleon, that grip on power he had, it just starts slipping away.
It's true. That Russian campaign, it was like a shot of adrenaline for his enemies, right? Suddenly they're winning, and the momentum, it just shifts. By 1814, those coalition forces, they're knocking on the door of Paris.
And this is where Napoleon's story takes another wild turn.
Yeah.
Abdicates the throne, right? Exiled to Elba. Elba. This tiny island compared to, ruling most of Europe.
Elba. Yeah, a bit of a change of scenery, you could say. But even stuck on this rock, Napoleon, that ambition, it never really went away, did it?
Because he escapes.
Yeah.
1815, he's back in France.
Yeah.
With just a handful of loyal followers. I mean, what is he thinking? Did he honestly believe he could just, rewind history, get everything back?
It really speaks to, maybe his charisma, this belief in his own destiny, that he was meant for greatness. He comes back to France, promising change, a more liberal France. And for a little while, those 100 days, it actually seemed like maybe, just maybe, he could pull it off.
But it was never going to last, was it?
Yeah.
Waterloo. 1815.
Yeah.
The final curtain on the Napoleon show.
Waterloo, the name that's synonymous with Napoleon's ultimate defeat. This time he's facing the British and the Prussians, led by the Duke of Wellington, a man who'd studied Napoleon, knew his tactics inside and out.
The script doesn't hold back. It really puts you right there on that battlefield. The clash of armies, the cannons, the sheer scale of it all. Just, wow.
Waterloo was brutal, a bloodbath. And in the end, it was a reminder, a very harsh reminder, of the human cost of Napoleon's ambition. His forces were completely routed, his dreams of empire gone, finished.
And no more comebacks this time. Exiled again to St. Helena. Talk about remote, a tiny island in the middle of the South Atlantic.
St. Helena, a fitting end, in a way, for a man who once commanded continents. He spent those last years dictating his memoirs, trying to shape how history would remember him.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Those final years. What was going through his mind? Regret? Or was he still defiant, still dreaming of what might have been?
We can only speculate, right? But one thing's for sure, Napoleon, he left his mark on the world. Legal systems, borders, the whole map of Europe, he reshaped it.
A man of contradictions, a true product of his time, and yet, at the same time, this force that changed the course of history in such profound ways.
Absolutely. And maybe that's why we're still talking about him. That's why his story still fascinates us, because it gets at these fundamental questions of ambition, of power, of legacy. Who was he, really?
Hero or villain? Liberator, tyrant? I guess it's never that simple, is it?
No, it never is. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from Napoleon. History, it's not black and white. It's messy, complicated, full of these gray areas. And even the biggest figures in history, well, they're shaped by forces they can't control, just like the rest of us.
Wow, what a journey this has been. Napoleon Bonaparte. From those early days in Corsica to Emperor of France and finally, exile. What a story.
I know, right? It really gives you a sense of the sweep of history, the ambition, the ideas, the sheer unpredictability of it all.
He certainly made his mark on the world, and you've given us so much to think about, so thanks for that.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And to all of you listening, we hope this deep dive into the life of Napoleon has given you some new insights, some food for thought. Until next time, keep exploring history, keep asking those tough questions, and keep those minds